Bittensor is a decentralized artificial intelligence incentive mechanism.
You don't have, like with Bitcoin, just miners trying to solve arbitrary puzzles. You have miners trying to find actual solutions in the realm of AI.
We're obviously now in a world where there's huge capex spend to centralized AI. OpenAI raising like 64 billion in one round, and now Meta announcing that they're gonna start data centers of the size of Manhattan. You really want to create a decentralized alternative. We say it's kind of the black swan event of AI, but all of the reports that are focused on AI are basically ignoring this market for now. And I think that's quickly going to change.
Hey, Schuil here. Thanks for tuning in. Real quick before we begin, if you enjoyed this episode, if you learned something, please consider to follow or subscribe or share this episode. That helps us out a lot. It helps us to reach more people and to spread quality education across the space about crypto and Web3. Also, if you're part of a crypto project or represent one and you would like to come on the show or do sponsoring, please get in touch with us. And lastly, everything we talk about today is for educational purposes and no financial advice. Enjoy the show.
All right. Welcome to the TEACHMEDEFI podcast, Frank.
Thanks for having me.
Lovely to have you here. I mean, we had loads of technical issues now. We're 35 minutes late to starting this.
We have 10 minutes left for the actual podcast.
As I understand, you're the co-founder of Safello, right? Which is a leading crypto exchange in the Nordics. And you guys started accumulating TAO, the token of the project Bittensor, as an asset on your balance sheet, right? I think this is something unique. I mean, it's been happening with Bitcoin for a lot of like listed companies. Obviously, probably the most well-known one, MicroStrategy, Michael Saylor. But I thought this is quite interesting, and I thought we could talk today a bit like about obviously your history, Safello, the strategy you guys are following by doing that, but also then specifically about Bittensor, about that project, so to say, and the whole ecosystem around it. What do you think?
Yeah, no, sounds good. Absolutely.
Okay, lovely. I mean, what is sort of like your story? How did Safello come about? What do you guys do? And then we can take it from there, I guess.
Sure. So Safello has been around for ages. It's been founded in 2013. And my personal background, I had two companies before that. So I'm definitely ancient in the entrepreneurial sense. We were founded on the principle of creating a safe and compliant way, an entry point for people into crypto. This was a time, 2013, there was barely anything. I lived through the collapse of Mt. Gox and seen kind of everything over time, whether it's the ICO craze or even in 2014, 15, where Bitcoin companies were reframing themselves as blockchain companies just to get new venture capital in. A lot of these history lessons that get kind of lost over time in today's market. But at that time, there was not really a company. We were based out of Europe, and that goes broadly for Europe, that was really looking to do it by the books from day one. So we set up to do that with proper registration with the financial inspection that was in Sweden. Now, obviously, we're moving towards a MiCA license in Europe. And providing Swedish banking rails, Swedish payment methods, and also Swedish identity method over time. We tried many times to internationalize that. Sadly, as our volume was like 95% Swedish, and every time we tried to internationalize, the bank was threatening us to shut down our whole business. So there's many of those war stories. That is Safello. But Safello today is over 400,000 users. We're publicly listed on Nasdaq First North since 2021. And more recently, we moved into Bittensor for a crypto strategic reserve. We also recently closed a actual commercial agreement with a Swedish bank, which is unique in its kind, where Safello can transition in a full crypto bank offering bank accounts and credit cards, and hopefully more products in the future. So yeah, that's us. That's my background. I'm the chairman as well, for what it's worth, and the largest shareholder. But I stepped down as CEO, which I was for 10 years, to hand it over to the current CEO, Emily Moritz.
Yeah, that's awesome. You've been around for a long time. Maybe you mentioned that and I missed it. Is TAO the first asset you're kind of like accumulating, or did it start with Bitcoin?
No, we started with a strategic reserve all the way back, I think it was 2021 already, where there was primarily we acquired Bitcoin and then Ethereum. And only now we converted that existing treasury away from Bitcoin and Ethereum into Bittensor Tau. So yeah, we've been, I think now the categorization is between treasury companies that are a pure play treasury business versus balance sheet companies, people that have, or companies that have assets on their balance sheets. So we're considered in that sense a balance sheet company, and we've done that for a long time, and had it since 2021. I believe it was 21.
Well, so actually, you converted your BTC and ETH holdings into Tau, so it's like all Tau now. What is the reason behind that? Okay.
So it's not all Tau. So we still have I think 2 BTC left. So I mean it's aligned with my personal discovery of Bittensor and Tau and the ecosystem that I got really excited about, and the way that went for me was that obviously I've seen everything for a long time. What I liked about Bitcoin were the things like an open and permissionless system, a fixed supply. So it's not, controlled by venture capital from day one with a pre-mine that sits in a foundation that then, get used and abused by those running the foundation or not running the foundation. And real technological innovation. So for me, in the ecosystem, that was Bitcoin and the early cryptocurrencies that happened then. And then obviously a lot of companies around that ecosystem have been built. I would say for me, Ethereum and that ecosystem was the second a wave of that true innovation. And then we have waves like ICO, but they were not really like core innovation for me. A lot of that real innovation in the crypto space, I think, has been around Ethereum with stable coins, with real world assets, I think, and with all the DeFi products. And then Solana has done interesting stuff, but it's for my sort of OG crypto heart, a little bit of a casino in the meme coin economy. But they did do something that I think is interesting by just focusing on the end user experience. I think they did that well, which has allowed them to be very effective in competing with Ethereum. But Bittensor for me had all those kind of characteristics that feels very familiar. At the same time, it's doing a lot of the things right that some of the other ecosystems have not done right. So for instance, with Bittensor, you have a token, its own token, which has the same kind of halving schedule, 21 million every fourth year, approximately, based on the block propagation. There's a halving that it follows, but all its subnets, which are basically their own project, you can look at it at layer 2 tokens on the L1 being a Bittensor. They also have their own token with their fixed supply. And unlike, for instance, Ethereum, that, to a large degree failed to capture the value from the layer 2s, the idea was the gas fee and the ultrasound money thesis. What's interesting, but still an experiment, is that the value of the subnets are actually denominated in Tau. So there's a direct correlation. So you can look at Bittensor and the Tau token as an index of the entire ecosystem in one way. At the same way, all those tokens have their own subnets. So that's one interesting thing. And then in Bitcoin, you have the proof of work consensus algorithm that basically you apply your miners and energy consumption to mine Bitcoin, which of course, coming from the compliance world that we worked in as an exchange, often the regulators were saying, energy misuse. Well, we always had the counter arguments, like look at the grid and how it's stabilized grid and it's using excess capacity. Having said that, I think the beauty of Bittensor is that it's taking that and has created what it's called the UMA consensus algorithm, consensus mechanism, which actually uses this compute to do useful things for artificial intelligence. So that's what got me excited. And then, there's a, period and transition, or like, how you say, get the board and the company, obviously we're publicly traded, on board with that thesis, which took a bit of time. And then we started transitioning into Bittensor from our crypto reserve that was just BTC and ETH. So long answer, but hopefully provide some color.
No, that's good. Can you just first give like a bit of an idea? you kind of mentioned it, but like, what is Bittensor about? What is Bittensor trying to solve, and how? Is it to create better AI models? Is it to just to get an overarching idea of it?
I'll do my best. So Bittensor is a decentralized artificial intelligence incentive mechanism, essentially. So it is not a narrowly defined like solution to one AI problem. It's creating a protocol to broadly incentivize any type of kind of innovation around AI, but even beyond AI, you can look at it almost as an incentive mechanism for any kind of open source. Um, the beauty of that is that, like, we're obviously now in a world where there's huge capex spent into centralized AI, with the likes of OpenAI raising like 64 billion in one round, and now Meta announcing that they're gonna start data centers of the size of Manhattan, where XAI is building this Colossus 2 huge cluster, where Goldman Sachs, I think, is predicting 1.15 trillion in capex spend. It will be in around between 25 and 27, and that's not stopping. At the same time, it becomes a nation state kind of a fight between primarily China and the US, which is similar to what the monetary fight was. If you look back at Bitcoin and what Bitcoin did for money, I think the Tensor is doing for intelligence, where you really want to create a decentralized alternative. Not only from a privacy perspective, you just heard Sam Altman state that there is no legal protection when you're using their platform, let alone that there's an NSA director on the board of directors. So, take that as you will. And then obviously, if you use the Chinese platform, there's no data protection at all. So I think data protection and, the most powerful technology that we've ever seen being created by humankind, being in the hands of nation states, or even commercial companies, but by proxy also nation states, is one thing that is very similar to what made Bitcoin important to the world as a sort of a decentralized platform. So that's one. The other thing is that the actual compute and the effectiveness of how you apply that compute can compete with centralized AI. So obviously, for the general training, we're seeing now that they built these clusters to have the efficiency to be able to do the training of the models. At the same time, you saw what happened with the open source model, the DeepSeek moment. What a fraction of the cost they were able to produce a very competitive model. And one of the things that I think is happening now and that is interesting is that people are trying to decentralize that training model so you can tap into a whole bunch of compute that's sometimes 10, 20 times cheaper than the cost of doing it in a centralized way. Or model hosting, for instance, we're seeing Shoots do it at that price point. And interestingly, we put out research in the early days of Shoots. It's one subnet within the Tensor. The growth curve that we saw within that was outpacing the centralized players. So if you look from 0 to, let's say, 20 months, I think, or 50 months, whatever the framework had, it was growing faster than the centralized compute. I think that was particularly comparing to Google's Gemini. OpenAI was going still faster, but it shows you that, and we say it's kind of the black swan event of the AI. Nobody's really paying attention to it, but if you look at the market cap when the ChatGPT moment happened, you see the same growth in decentralized AI. But all of the reports that are focused on AI are basically ignoring this market for now, and I think that's quickly going to change.
You just mentioned the growth was faster, but on what metric was that?
Sorry, that was on the amount of tokens that are being used. So it within the time frame of months, literally months, it grew to hundreds of billions of tokens being spent daily, and in total, in aggregate, I think 10 trillion tokens that is being used on the Shoots platform, which is one subnet within Bittensor, subnet 64, for those who want to check it out.
sorry, just to clarify, that's the input-output tokens. So we're not talking about crypto tokens, but on the AI side, or
No. So that's like an AI definition of a token, right? So I think a token is like one character in an LM, large language model. So that's how you should look at it. So yeah, not the crypto tokens, no. Which can be confusing when you're talking about those two industries. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. Just wanted to clarify it for people watching. And then I looked into Bittensor now a bit, but just since recently, so I'm not that familiar with it. But in terms of the different participants in the network, just to see if I'm onto something there, you think, and then maybe you can expand on it or correct me, is so the way I understood it broadly is like, if you have, like you said, you have these subnets which address different problems. So it's not just like one sort of AI model that is being optimized or anything. It's like different problems that are being solved in each of these subnets, and they have their own tokens, crypto tokens, not not LLM input output tokens as well.
So there's a specific terminology called alpha tokens. So, to distinguish between the LLM tokens and these tokens, you can use the terminology alpha tokens. Yeah.
Yeah, love it. Good point. Alpha tokens. So, so a subnet creator defines a problem, and then also defines, like, let's say, text generation, right? And then also defines a few metrics on which to assess the quality of the output that you get. And then you have miners, I believe they're called, and the way I understood it, those are the people solving that problem and competing with each other to deliver high quality outputs, which optimize along those metrics defined by the subnet creator, right? And then you got the validators, which are literally, the way I understood it, the proof of stake consensus validators of the network as well. And they, on top of that responsibility, they also evaluate the outputs of the miners. So they have the responsibility to like rank them and the outputs in their quality. And if you deviate, if a specific value, you have to find consensus somehow, right? So if you deviate significantly from all the other validators in your assessment of the quality of the output of a miner, then I believe it is deemed that your assessment is not of high quality, and it would hurt you in your own reward payments in Tau that you deviated. So essentially incentivizing to also evaluate properly the outputs. Is that like broadly correct?
Sounds about right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I have much to add there without going too much into the matrix of the deeper mechanisms. But it's good to understand, as a small addition to that, is that there are many different categories of miners. Like, so where in sort of other protocols, there's kind of one mining function doing one specific thing. Within the structure of Bittensor, the 128 subnets all define kind of their own requirements for mining within the consensus algorithm of UMA. So that is kind of the differentiation of how, it's not one thing. So it's quite highly specialized what the miners need to do. And I think the learning curve for miners is therefore also higher. Those that are doing, more general compute things, inference and stuff, that's maybe easier to do and get into as a miner than sort of the specialized things like predictive stuff, like there's climate modeling. Like, there's a bunch of subnets that we can go through the categories, of course, but they're highly specialized at the end of the day. Now, the good thing is, if you're specialized in that specific thing, then obviously you have a legs up in getting the rewards within winning them the consensus model.
Right. Okay, that's a good point. Yeah, you don't have, like with Bitcoin, just miners trying to solve like arbitrary cryptographic puzzles, right? You have miners depending on the subnet, depending on the problem, trying to find actual like solutions to problems in terms of in the realm of AI. So is it more hands-on then? This is what I'm not fully understanding yet. Are these miners like hands-on trying to develop or tweak existing AI models to solve that problem of the subnet particularly well? Because like on Bitcoin, if you run a miner, it's just like you just run it. I think it's less hands-on, right?
Within the specifications that the subnet has defined. So that's what they're working against. So yeah, so they do it against the specific subnet specifications.
Right. The game theory and the dynamics, the incentivization game, I think is interesting with Bittensor. I'm curious to hear your take on this, because basically the problem we're trying to solve is also like how do you incentivize all participants fairly and also in a way to create behaviors which are positive for the network, right? I think there's often not an easy problem to solve. And then like I guess this plays into my question here is you have all these different subnets now. So I think one problem is, okay, which subnets accrue most of the tau, right? Like which subnets get the bigger share of the block rewards that are continuously paid out by the protocol. How is that determined?
That's based on how many people are staked to that specific subnet. So the emission is based on how much people stake into that specific subnet with tau. So you have a correlation between the alpha token and the tau value that they have. So each subnet is valued in an amount of tau. So I think the largest subnet, which was subnet is still subnet 64, at the highest point they were like 0.2 tau. Basically, that was one alpha token you would buy for 0.2 tau, and that price sets then the emission for the newly minted tau that they get. So which I think at the high point they were like 14 whatever %, and then also the aggregate of all the subnets then is priced, if you aggregate it, it's like 1 tau as a baseline, but actually it can trade higher than that as well. So at the peak it was like 2 tau almost. Now I think we're at 1.15 tau, which is kind of an interesting metric to evaluate whether the overall subnet market is overvalued or undervalued in relation to tau. So it gets kind of complex, and I'm not saying that I know everything and that I know best. It's very early as well. This transition to these subnet token alpha tokens, that only happened in February. So before that, it was the validators that were deciding where the emissions were going, and there were way fewer subnets. So they open it up, and now we have 128 subnets that all have their tau, their own alpha tokens with their own emission schedules, right? And since some of them, I think, have not all of them are in the same curve because some came to market later, so they're all on their own emission timeline, which means that they all have their own kind of yield as well. But there's a bunch of complexities, and that makes it a very interesting market and very new market. The interconnected is both a plus to the overall tau token as well, but it also creates this connection problem where if tau goes up or down, the subnet values also go up and down in USD terms. So I think the whole ecosystem is kind of like now looking at what that means and how to go about it. And the subnet owners, are they selling their token, yes or no, for their operations? Are they doing OTC deals, yes or no? So there's this like whole world of different dynamics on this new kind of token ecosystem that everyone is trying to figure out. It's early enough to not necessarily know how exactly it's going to play out, but what we have seen, and for me, I do come from a higher level perspective of looking at it as a broad ecosystem. I don't have a necessarily technical background myself, even though I've run a bunch of tech startups, but it's to see what's happening in terms of everything around the ecosystem, whether it's the human capital flowing in or actual capital flowing in, what are people developing, is there real innovation going on? And I think we're seeing things happening that are, starting to be competitive with centralized solutions, and also where we're just seeing novel things being tried out in a way that I think can lead to asymmetric outcomes. If you think of it, like there are 128 companies essentially building new type of novel products and their own services. If only one of them is a massive success, it basically boosts the entire TAO ecosystem, right? So that's why it's like, yeah, the TAO is an index. At the same time, they need money. So there's this weird dynamic where, for instance, when the market goes up, if you think about it, if this subnet is valued, let's say at $10 million, but now the TAO price goes up twice, and this is a fair market value of $10 million, but TAO went from, let's say, $400 to $800. Then suddenly this is $20 million. So naturally, like if really people believe that the fair market value hasn't changed, you would actually want to sell off the alpha token, to exchange it for TAO. And then maybe since the price went up, you also sell, the TAO. So there's the natural selling pressure on both sides when the market goes up. And in vice versa, when it goes down, both get underpriced. So this is kind of new. We haven't seen that in the crypto market in this way, which is everyone is kind of trying to understand the real dynamics here, as well as figuring out how can you make sure that the subnets still get enough money as a business to operate. And that, for instance, when you are the number one subnet, from an economic perspective, investors assess that no, that doesn't have enough upside. So they kind of, at this stage, avoid some of the top subnets. So there's this whole discussion with like, okay, well, we don't actually want people just to invest in the lower tier subnets because that doesn't make sense for the whole ecosystem. Anyway, just highlighting some of these dynamics that are very early and make it very interesting and novel. But it's too early to tell how some of this is going to play out.
Yeah. So I guess people might be looking at all the different subnets, and each one has their own alpha token as a way to kind of like, speculate or invest and buy that specific alpha token. And
yeah. So there's a lot of speculation, because like you need to register a new subnet. So each new subnet is registered, but you don't necessarily know who is this, who's behind it, who registered it, what are they going to do, what's going to happen with the subnet. So there's a lot of speculation with a new subnet. And then some, might do something amazing. Some might not do anything. And then those subnets also get sold to other parties. And what has happened as well within this subnet ecosystem, you saw kind of the equivalent of domain squatting, since there's only a limited amount of subnets, and the younger the older your subnet is, the more emission you already have. So basically more liquidity that it can carry, which means that some of the highest numbers are in one sense, more valuable than the latest one. So you have the equivalent of domain squatting happening in these subnets, which is why the foundation decided to cap it for now for 128 to make sure that it matures, that these are serious teams. And then they want to open up again, but they're also looking for a mechanism where it might be incentivized that if you're not actively working with this, that you automatically get kicked out and other people can take over your subnet. At the same time, I'm advocating for simplicity, because I think a lot of this gets too complicated for newcomers to the ecosystem really quickly. While, we've seen plenty of success around within complexity, where it's Bitcoin or Ethereum. It's just at the end of the way, you want to obfuscate some of those things away in the application layer to make it simple for users. And I think there are great platforms and people building the infrastructure and tooling to make it easy and accessible to people.
So can you actually are some of these alpha tokens of these subnets like listed on exchanges themselves?
Right. So initially, you could only trade them on dedicated TAO platforms. You have like taos.io and tao.app, and you have a Backprop Finance. They were the specialized Bittensor platforms where you could only trade it against TAO. So you need to, go there with TAO. But now, at least from the pricing, I think they're on CoinMarketCap. So each subnet you can find now on like CoinMarketCap. So if you look for shoots, you will see shoots on CoinMarketCap with its pricing. And what people are building are bridges. So the people are building bridges to Solana, they're building bridges to Ethereum, and they're creating. I think TauFi is one platform that is then creating kind of the same type of liquidity pools like with Uniswap, where you can instantly transact directly with the subnets and directly with Tau, where before you also had to bridge your, let's say, your rep Tau that it exists on Ethereum to Tau to then be able to interact. Now you can do it directly. So a lot of these, this liquidity is being, these connections are being built to make it more accessible to people and also integrated with existing platforms.
Okay. So do you think there's more value that will accrue to these to the subnet token layer as well? I mean, I'm interested in this kind of dynamic where value will flow. You mentioned, for example, that from alpha tokens, value would accrue to Tau. And you made it like a comparison to Ethereum. And Ethereum and layer 2s, obviously, that's a different kind of layers. But there you have the big topic of like that not enough value accrues from layer 2s to Ethereum structurally, right? They use the blob space. They put the commitments on Ethereum, and their centralized sequencers are making a lot of ETH. So the profit accrues to the layer 2s. No profit really flows back to ETH. How does that look with Tau? I guess.
So with newly minted Tau, there is a portion that goes into Tau's pool and into Alpha tool. So there's like a direct connection between the two. They call it the root proportion with the APY of sort of the subnet 0, which is Tau itself, where you stake to over time going basically to 0, and it's moving to the subnet token. So the dynamic that they try to build is that if you don't naturally move into the subnets with your capital, then you're basically losing out on all the APY that moves naturally to the subnets. Now, so far, that hasn't really worked. It worked in the beginning where there was a lot of uptick, as I said, to the aggregate value going over to Tau in terms of relative valuation. Now it's at its all-time low, which is in a way, I think, an opportunity. But that's kind of dynamic. Is it really working? But in principle, it's baked into the protocol itself to force people who are maximizing their ROI to start investing into the subnets. Now, the interesting thing with the subnets is obviously that you have that connection with Tau, so you're exposed to the Tau movement in terms of USD price, as well as the fluctuation on the Tau, the Tau emissions and the Tau price, and then the actual APY that you get on the subnet. Right now, the volatility on the subnet outweighs sort of the APY that you get on the subnet. So it's more still speculative. But over time, maybe that APY on those subnets become more important if you look at it from a long-term investment horizon, if that makes sense.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah. What's the utility of an alpha token? Why would you want to buy an alpha token?
The alpha token represents essentially the subnet and the subnet team and their effort, right? So, for instance, the dynamics that plays in some of the subnet is, for instance, that they have a commercial business and they're buying up the token, right? And their whole mechanism works just around the token itself. So it depends on the subnet, but effectively that alpha token is the incentive mechanism for whatever that subnet is doing, right? And everything they're doing is denominated in that. Now, there's, of course, with some subnet, they're just doing value extraction and they're not doing anything with the subnet token. And then there are those that are really meaningfully looking, okay, how can we take this token, just like in any crypto token economy, how can we make sure that value flows back to the alpha token holders? So again, very early, like we're talking February, it's now July. But I think there's good and bad examples of what's happening in the ecosystem. And how people are treating it. So, for instance, Shoots did like big buybacks of the token, and I think there are quite a few that done these buybacks. So they generate revenue here from that. They can burn the token essentially, and I think the token itself then has its own value. So it's of course helping them survive with the operations. And it's what I like seeing is that some of them are doing OTC deals, so they don't actually put price pressure on the alpha token, but they make sure that that happens outside of kind of the flow. Otherwise, you just have this constant sell pressure for those that haven't raised outside venture capital. Um, so yeah, but it's good to understand it. It's again the Bitcoin emission model, right? So a lot of those tokens flow to the token holders. It's not a pre-mine. These tokens are not pre-mined. They are following the emission schedule of Bitcoin. So it's not like, hey, they are sitting on a bunch of tokens. No, it's actually the token holders sit on it. So they're naturally incentivized to make sure that the alpha token holders are, incentivized to keep the token and make it part of the subnet's mission. So the natural dynamics are much healthier than a lot of these pre-mine layer twos that are raising a bunch of money, sitting on the foundation, and have done these unlock schedules. It's not like that.
Yeah. And I guess there's a game around getting more of the tau emissions to your subnet, right? It seems to be this is sort of like the gamified element where the subnets are competing to be the most useful, like most deemed useful to get more of the token emissions of tau.
Yes, I think by heart, I believe 18% goes to the subnet owners, and then 41 to the validators, 41 to the miners, which is why you're seeing a lot of the subnets, they work cross functions, right? So they might be the owner of the subnet, but they also might be doing mining and even validating to maximize kind of the value extraction for their own tokens. So I think, it's game theory, game mechanics that's across the board. So and there's also actors that are deliberately sort of attacking the network and attacking that to test it. So the beauty of it, it is getting hardened. It is already hardened with the first phase. Now with DTAO, you're seeing that this part of the system is being hardened. And you see, despite of that, it's grown organically into, $4 billion market cap. And that I think is for me, now, coming from the early days of Bitcoin, seeing these other ecosystem, no pre-mine, seeing an ecosystem with essentially no outside capital inflating its valuation, just organically grow into all of these subnets with all of these teams. Just Manifold to yesterday announced that is one, company with I think a couple of subnets. They raised 10 million just as that subnet owner. So there is venture capital just going into these subnet companies separately, and that kind of ecosystem where it's organically growing at this pace with all this innovation is what makes me excited about Bittensor.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, you're right. I think the market cap is it 4 billion? I think it's almost like exceeding now the market cap of Polkadot, which is, I believe, the SDK which Bittensor used to build their chain.
Yeah. Yes.
Which was interesting to me.
Well, so it's obviously a question, the blockchain itself, but it is just a broad incentive mechanism, right? And that is to understand, just like Bitcoin in essence is for what other people are doing with smart contracts, relatively simple. It's okay that it's relatively simple. It's the important part is it working? Are people naturally inclined to do and build things for the decentralized AI space? Is it able to compete? And that's the beauty of it. It is working, and it's gone to this stage, and we're only seeing acceleration across the board. Whether it comes to venture capital, whether it's coming to people coming into the ecosystem, whether we're seeing the tooling and infrastructure being built around it. And of course, like us, treasury companies or treasury balance sheet companies are actively participating and trying to get into it. So yeah, all signals are green from my perspective. And of course, we will see what happens in the bear market. You always have this pressure when the whole market goes down. What survives, what doesn't survive. But I think the great thing is that it has basically started from an organic point of view, which is, from my perspective, a way stronger base than many of the pre-mined, cryptocurrencies that I've seen over the years. That particularly in a bear market, they lose their momentum and they just give up.
Yeah, I agree. I think it'll be interesting to see in the end, I guess, what comes out of these subnets. What they develop, what the miners develop, and what problems get solved. And like you said, if you have one where you get like tremendous utility out of this thing, that will be probably like another catalyst for that whole ecosystem. And I guess that it'll be like a sign that this thing is actually working and generating useful stuff. I guess it plays into what I wanted to ask you is so you're accumulating this as a listed company, right? Do you think how do you view tau accumulation in that context? Obviously, it has started. BTC and ETH um, has become it has become more common recent months to start buying these as a company. And you have like BTC and ETH backed SPACs going public as well. Um, do you think like Tau could be like a credible balance sheet asset for exposure to AI, to decentralized AI?
Yeah, for sure, decentralized AI, as it is the front runner in the DEI space compared to all the other protocols, and it has a broad applicability with 128 subnets innovating across different type of innovation. Also, these mechanics of mimicking Bitcoin makes it a better treasury asset than the assets that are pre-mined. So for me, as a holder, as a publicly traded company, I feel more comfortable holding something that has a limited supply and mimics those kind of dynamics than something that has a pre-mine where you don't know what happens with the supply. So the distribution of that supply, as well as that it's fixed, I think is an important aspect. And then as a thesis, um, the decentralized AI thesis is an is the black swan of the AI world. And we're seeing hints of it competing already with the centralized AI world. If that has a breakthrough across any of these 128 subnets, I think it can grow faster than any other cryptocurrency that we're currently seeing in the market. Um, Without a doubt, Bitcoin has done a tremendous job in establishing itself as a store of value for the world, and it's gotten to the state of nation states. I remember in 2014, I was pitching this in London as, well, given enough time, this is going to dictate monetary policy and affect the world. And with the Genius Act in the US, clearly that's where we're at right now. And the stablecoin legislation enabling that become a permanent part of the global monetary flow has cemented kind of Bitcoin and by extension stable coins and crypto in this world. This is the next leg of this at the fastest exponentially growing technology field there is, and it equally requires this decentralized approach. So yeah.
Love it. Almost a perfect last word, actually, to be honest. Um, uh, yeah, I'm curious to see how this plays out. When you say there was no pre-mine, just to double click on it, does that mean there was no like team allocation or like investors that got Tau at the beginning or something like that?
If you know Bitcoin, that's exactly how it works, right? There is no pre-mine. So they started mining. Now, just like Satoshi was the first miner on the Bitcoin network, and through that was able to accumulate a lot of Bitcoin that are still sitting on those addresses. Certainly, early miners on Bittensor were able to accumulate a significant amount, but it doesn't mean that there was a pre-mine distribution of a token where you have an allocation sitting there with overhang on the market that needs to be sold as well. And I also see that those that had early have been mining early, that they are actually very actively reinvesting their Tau into the ecosystem through investments in the subnets, in the tooling, and also helping the protocol develop. So it's all in all much more organic protocol than everything else that I'm seeing. Not everything else, but a large majority of the other cryptocurrencies that are primarily hijacked by venture capital from the start, right? And what you see there is that there is a pre-mine allocation and lockups for 6 months or sometimes longer. But then when those get locked up and the investors were there just to make the multiple, then you see that this flood to the market, and typically the coin crashes to zero. So there's this natural mechanism within many of the pre-mined cryptocurrencies that that overhang ultimately leads to a collapse of the coin, unless they find the escape velocity within what they're doing. Which again is why I like this organic approach much better.
That's a great point. So I guess to wrap it up, what are you looking at now and in the foreseeable future in terms of Bittensor, subnets, and all that? Just in case viewers are interested to check out that market as well and understand where they could start.
A very good place to start is with Safello. So safello.com/labs, and Safello is SAFELLO. .com/labs. We created a specific subsidiary, Safello Labs, to focus entirely on the Bittensor ecosystem. And on this URL, we launched a report called Decentralized AI, the Black Swan. And that is a good primer to this ecosystem to get started. For Safello, we want to be the safe fellow as we were to the crypto industry, but then for the Bittensor ecosystem. So newcomers get these type of insights, and also that we put in specific research to help investors make investment decision in, for instance, different subnets. We're early in that journey, but we're working with a team within Safello on these type of efforts.
How are things going with MiCA? Is it good? Is it easy to comply with? I just hear things as from the outside, but you guys have to comply and
Right.
stuff. So I'm just wondering.
Well, for those not familiar with the market in crypto assets regulation, it's kind of a comprehensive framework that every cryptocurrency business that wants to continue operation need to adhere to in the European Union. Now, there are different countries where you can apply for this regulation and then passport it to other countries. Some countries are more difficult than others. And where you get it might also be an indicator of what type of business you could do in a specific country. So if you get it in a sort of low valued regulatory regime, it might not hold the same value as, for instance, Sweden, where we're getting it. We have done the application. It's a tremendous amount of work. Maybe 1,000 pages of the policy, but then you need to also implement that and be able to kind of run a mini bank. Now, we've obviously been running that as a highly regulated business. We've been audited twice by the regulators, successfully passed it, and by the tax authority, successfully passed it. We are the ones who are helping the authorities actually sell their Bitcoins or crypto when they need to, because we won the procurement. We extended the procurement. So we're quite ingrained in the compliance framework. And we have applied, and we are waiting for the application to be approved from the regulator. So they're looking at it. As it stands now, we might be the first one to get the Swedish MiCA application. And the Swedish regulator is historically quite hostile towards and very strict towards cryptocurrency. So the bar is pretty high for that one.
Gotcha. Okay, fun times. And are you gonna be then a SaaS or a crypto asset service provider? Is that what it is, or?
Yeah, and then you have other regulation, right? You also need to be GDPR compliant, DORA compliant. There's tax regulation coming next year.
There's not a lack of regulations, is there, to comply?
No, so on the one end, Europe has been first with some of this regulation, which I think paves the way for wider adoption within the European Union. On the other hand, Europe loves to over-regulate and create hindrances for entrepreneurship. So while the US was way later, and now they've delivered a piece of legislation that completely swings in the other direction. And maybe because it is a little bit later than the European Union, it might have been more sophisticated and more helpful to the industry there. Having said that, I think it does professionalize in a way the European market, and it is a filter. So it does prevent some of the bad actors or mediocre actors to be filtered out. So the consumer protection of the MiCA license does really help the end consumer. However, it is stifling some of the positive the benefits of what crypto is about in terms of privacy, how much you can keep in your own wallet, or what is this? Now I'm getting stuck on the details, but there is a certain limit, I think, in taking it out of a wallet without KYC, right? So, and of course, that's understood. At the same time, if you look at the KYC regime, I think the effectiveness is maybe 1% on stopping money laundering and everything like that. So it's a very ineffective kind of global oversight approach that KYC has built, and it creates a lot of hurdles. It also excludes a lot of people globally from participating in the global financial system, which is why I'm a little bit he's jaded on crypto, having been there from the very beginning. It was about really opening up to the unbanked and underbanked and creating one global financial system that is not only a store of value, but also a means of value exchange between people that would otherwise not easily be able to exchange value. Meanwhile, I think regulation and maybe slow adoption, like from a user perspective and end user perspective, UI, UX, has hindered the adoption to be fast enough to beat the regulators to the punch. So I think it is getting better, and I think like stablecoin solves a lot, and I think it's largely unhindered. But at the same time, it's still like the in and out point to the above board economy. Is the gatekeepers are still there, right? And they're entrenched. And in the US, I think there's also been specific compromises made in the Genius legislation that were put there by the banking sector. So yeah, to be expected, but some of the promises of the crypto space and Bitcoin particularly have been undermined over time. So that's what it is.
Thank you so much, Frank, for giving us a bit of an overview on Bittensor, but also the additional detail here. Perhaps we can revisit it and see where things have gone in a few months.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Great, thank you.